Hello everyone, this is Lucy from Seaside Tarot channel, and I thought I'd pop on and do a response to Mag Black and Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot channel, and I'm going to respond to a tag called Tarot 90s Feels. And I watched Dawn's and I watched Mag's, and I thought, 90s was a particularly busy decade for me in that I moved from Sydney to Brisbane, to a city that I'd never been to before, to begin a new beginning. I wanted to move closer to my parents who lived by the sea, and Brisbane was the closest capital city for me to live in. It was a first for many things, the 90s for me. It was a decade of study. I studied at university. I studied theology at the second half of the 90s. I studied theology at the University of Tibetan Buddhism up at Shenrezig. And I also studied mediumship at the spiritual church. I was also a member of a choir at the police service, and so many new things happened in the 90s. It was a very busy decade for me. I can't say that for now, but during the 90s it was non-stop, go, go, go. I had my first dog in the 90s, a German Shepherd, which was a challenge because I'd never owned a dog before. So a German Shepherd was quite a big challenge. I had a young son, and I began a new beginning starting from 1990 when I bought my first house with a garden. Wasn't my first house. My first house was a unit, but in the 90s I'd never had a garden before. So for the first part of the 90s, a garden fascinated me until studies got too much and my garden got a bit wild. So for the first deck, I'm going to represent that period of my life. I'm going to use the Jonasa Jaus tarot. This is the 4th edition, and it is a lovely tarot. I'll just move some of these out of the way so I can pop this one down. And Jonasa Jaus is from Spain, I think, either Spain or Portugal, and it has the colours of the 90s that I loved, purple and green. Everything I bought was either purple or green. Then I moved into teal, but there I am, strong and dependent and defiant. I was going to achieve lots of things step by step. It was a new beginning of growth in the garden and a new beginning for learning who I was and how to use my mind and in achieving all sorts of things. I studied massage at the natural medicine college. I studied information technology at university. I studied Tibetan Buddhism at the University of Buddhism up on north of Brisbane at the Shenrezig, and I transformed from a moth into a butterfly during the 90s. I had lots of happenings happening. I had to train my German Shepherd not to be aggressive. There's me in a moth. I had to look after my son. There's me transforming from a moth into a butterfly. hope the previous ones came out all right. And I studied how to communicate with spirit and angels. I studied mediumship. So this is me in the garden, me learning all the different plants in the subtropics of Queensland. And we used to have tawny mouth owls come and visit us. Whenever an owl came, I always knew there was a message coming, following. So that's the first deck, which is the Jonasa Jaus, 4th edition. Nice deck. And because I went to university in the first half of 90s, I've picked the numerous tarot. One, because we had to live very frugally while I was a student, and so this tarot is simple but meaningful. It's quite clear in its message, but it's quite frugal in its message as well. I also had a lot of candles in the house. There were always candles and incense, and I studied Bach flower medicine and Australian essence medicine. I learnt Chinese massage. I bought my first massage table in the 90s. I studied crystal healing, spiritual healing, and I taught spiritual healing and mediumship. I ran 2 circles a week, one teaching spiritual healing and one teaching mediumship. I attended many circles as well to learn the energies and when guides were around us, and to see the orbs that floated around us while they were giving us healing or messages. So for me, this deck represents me studying. There was always books around the house, always studying something or other. It was a busy time, a very busy time, with candles and teas and friends and rejoicing when achieved things. I was very successful in the 90s, and there were sad times as well, but mainly happy times in the 90s, particularly the second half of the 90s. So that represents my university time. The next deck, the Numerous Void Tarot, represents, again, study time, the Book of Tombs, study, always studying, time for lots of young people in the 90s. I had my friend and his friends. I had lots of friends around to have meditation circles. Of course, books were always around me. I had piles and piles of study books from university and college, and spiritual books. I think I bought everything that was on the bookshelf in the 90s. That was in the time of hard paperbacks. None of this iPads or anything like that. We never had iPads in the 90s. I think my first mobile phone was in the 90s, late second half of the 90s. Up until then, we had just ordinary phone on the home phone on the wire. This reminds me of Tibetan bells, my crystal healing. I still have all my crystals, but I don't do the healing anymore. It was also a time by the sea because my parents lived by the sea, so we spent all our holidays down by the sea. And this is the numerous void. Isn't that lovely? I did buy the second edition, but I prefer the first. The pictures are more clearer. And there's always flowers in Queensland. There's a tree every month of the year flowering. So around October, when it was time to study for exams, the jacarandas would bloom, and they were the purple flowers, and my favourite. Not the study time, but jacaranda time is a favourite time. So the next deck I want to talk about is the Lily White Tarot by Cecilia Melville. She's from France, and I bought this in 2018 because it reminded me of southeast Queensland where I live. All the colours, the sea, the seafood, the flowers. As I said, there's always flowers happening here. Even in winter time we have flowers, big colourful bougainvillea type flowers. And so this is a deck that represents where I live in the 90s and now in my retirement. Even the trees and the flowers and the animals can be found around where I live as well. So this is me stepping forward in 1990, a new beginning in 1990, unknown what's ahead of me. But now looking back, I realize how much I did in 1990. Here again, representing the colors of where I live and the strength I needed to achieve all the goals I'd set for myself in the 90s and the successes that I had during that period of my life. It was a very important time for me, the decade of the 90s. It was a time of learning who I was and what I can do, independent of being with others, in relationship to others, except for having lots of acquaintances and friends. And there I am. I had ginger hair in the 90s. Don't have that colour anymore, but there I am. So that's the Lily White. That's the Lily White. So the second half of the 90s was when I studied theology, and I studied at many different places, but mainly at the Institute of Buddhist Studies in Shinrezik, up on the tablelands behind the Sunshine Coast, north of Brisbane. And this is the Tarot Roots of Asia by Amat Clan Pratchar and Thoran Boon Yowan. Now that is a mouthful that I can't pronounce very well. This was published in 2001, and it says, "Believe nothing because a wise man said it. Believe nothing because it is generally held. Believe nothing because it is written. Believe nothing because it is said to be divine. Believe nothing because someone else believes it, but believe only what you yourself judge to be true. And that was words of the Buddha. So I studied Buddhism for nearly 10 years up at Shenrezi. I'd go up for the weekend once a month to be the visitor liaison officer, showing people around the institute and helping with the nuns facilitate the weekend workshops. And I'd look forward to each month studying different aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. So this deck very much represents that period in my life. It had a profound change to my beliefs and understanding of the meaning of life through the eyes of Buddha. So the little white book's quite nice on this deck as well. It gives the philosophy of Buddhism behind each of the cards. There's one here that's quite nice. Looking at it before. Star. The moon, look at that. Going within, seeking what's internal, being mindful of how your mind works through meditation. And by understanding the self, you understand others. Isn't that lovely? And the sun. So that's the Tower of Roots of Asia. Just put the fool at the beginning. And of course, every week I would attend, when I wasn't at Shenrezi, I would attend the spiritual church to learn how to be a medium, to connect to ghosts and spirits and guides and angels and loved ones, ancestors. So this deck represents that aspect of my studies as well. And I went on to run the healing circle at church for 5 years. So the 90s was a very busy time of meeting people, having lots of acquaintances. No one special in particular during the 90s. Just lots of people in my life. Through giving energy work to, through my crystal healing, or meditation work, through spiritual healing. So this is by Lisa Hunt, this deck. So I haven't used it very much. It's new to me, this one. But I wanted to get it out because it's very much that part of my life that I was developing in the late 90s with candles and incense and crystals and Bach flower essences and meditation and all that jazz. So what have I got here? So the decks I've shown you is the Future Ancestor Tarot, the Roots of Asia Tarot, Ghosts and Spirits Tarot by Lisa Hunt, The Future Ancestors by Lexa Luna Studios, and Lily White by Cecilia Mansfield. Have I got it? And Numerous Void by Noel Arthur Hempel. Have I done them all? Oh, and Johanna Jaus, for the 4th edition. So I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. God bless.